Good afternoon, everyone. We are so glad that you are here today to visit with us on the Garden Hour with MU Extension. We have several topics to talk about today. We have foliar diseases, growing carrots, growing lily of the valleys, pawpaws, just a wide variety of things. So we hope that you are able to learn something. And remember that you can always ask questions to the Ask Questions Here person in the chat room. If you are watching us live on YouTube, you can also ask some questions and they will be forwarded to the team so that we can try to answer them here, or we may email you with an answer later, just depending on how complicated the answer is. If you have not joined us before, remember that we have horticulture specialists all around the state, and you can kind of find the region where you live and look at the color and kind of find who your person is. But really, you can feel free to reach out to whoever's closest, just depending on where you are. We don't necessarily always recognize boundaries. We're a team. We try to help each other out. So please feel free to reach out to us. You also have many ways that you can listen to our Garden Hour. You can go directly to youtube.com MUIPM and you can watch live. And also there you will find the recordings of the shows plus any snippets that we might have. So there's many ways that you can view this information. And if you remember hearing something and you want to go back and say, what did they say about that? You can probably find a recording about it. So just know that those resources are there. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing. And by the way, my name is Gwen Funk. I'm up here in Northwest Missouri, and we have a beautiful sunny day today. And we are just going to segue right on into weather with Zack.
Great. Thank you, Gwen. And I'll echo that. I hope everyone is enjoying the nice weather we're having so far today. And as I get started today, I want to start and actually look at the rainfall we've received so far this week. This map is showing what is our radar estimated rainfall from this was overnight Monday into Tuesday morning if you were in the northwest part of the state, and then going into yesterday afternoon as well. Columbia and points east, we picked up on some of this rainfall as well. But totals so far this week have been pretty light. And have been pretty localized as well here. So really the only kind of significant rainfall here on this map where you should see the greens that show in excess of a half inch of rainfall is pretty spotty, and just a few spots that were lucky enough to get under a heavier thunderstorm. Boone County is a great example of how localized that rainfall was. We had anywhere from just a few hundredths in the northern part of the county to nearing a half inch south of Columbia in town. But overall, not a lot of rainfall and pretty dry to the south and southwest as well to start this week. Looking at our April month-to-date summary, honestly, not a lot of changes from the past couple of weeks. Temperatures across the state are still running slightly above normal. So right now about 2 to 3 degrees above normal for the month of April. And precipitation, again, is pretty localized, but also pretty dry through the first 24 days here of April. So on the right, if we look at our departure from normal so far for the month of April, you really only see a few spots that are green and showing that they're ahead on rainfall for the month. And so that's going to be really kind of far northern Missouri. Those locations picked up about 1 to 2 inches of rainfall last Thursday, and it's helped them out quite a bit for April. And then we see St. Louis, we've had some heavier thunderstorms rolled through for the month, but otherwise the rest of the state is pretty dry. So you see all these yellows and oranges. Just for a reference here, the orange color shows greater than an inch precipitation depth for deficit for the month. And we also have some reds that are showing some of those deficits up to 2 and 3 inches. And this is a concern because if we look at our most recent U.S. Drought Monitor map, you can see that we still have widespread abnormally dry and moderate drought conditions across the state as we get through April here, and even some severe drought into southeast Missouri. But the bigger story really is that if we look at this map on the right, this actually shows our departure from normal precipitation over the past 3 years. So going back to April of 2021, and we see a lot of reds and oranges and yellows for Missouri that just shows really we're coming off of back-to-back dry years in 2022 and 2023. And we've lost a lot of moisture over that time period, and so are still quite vulnerable to drought as we're going into this summer, especially given some of the drought status in April so far. But the good news is that we're going to have a really pleasant day today, and then I'm going to spend the rest of the time really talking about how much rainfall we're expected for the rest of the week. And it's going to be a bit of a washout this weekend into early next week. But as we just saw, this rainfall is really needed right now, and so will be a big help for drought. But again, today will be a beautiful day. We're looking at highs near 70 degrees, really across the entire state, pretty much. Looking on the right is our forecast percent sky cover for this afternoon. We're really just seeing a few clouds here and there, so really partly cloudy skies for today. But this might be your last afternoon to get outside and enjoy the nice weather and get anything you need to get done outdoors, because our rain chances are going to start to ramp up tomorrow and really last through Monday. And so I'm going to show here a lot of maps that are kind of showing how that rainfall will look like moving through. But the bottom line is we've got a big system that's moving into the west coast of the United States today, and it's going to take its time moving across the entire U.S. And ahead of that system, we're going to have several days with southerly winds that are going to bring a lot of warm temperatures and moisture from the Gulf of Mexico and give us several shots of rain here starting tomorrow. And so each of these maps shows a 24-hour precipitation accumulation forecast. And if we start it on Thursday, rainfall is going to move into southwest Missouri early tomorrow, spread north throughout the day. But we're looking at quite a bit of rainfall for the western half of Missouri. Just for reference, anything greater than the dark blue color here is over a ½ inch of rainfall. But these purples in far western Missouri from Joplin up to Kansas City, that's up to 2 inches of rainfall that is forecasted for tomorrow. As we get into Friday, that axis kind of shifts to the east, and we're looking at more of a ½ inch to 1 inch of rainfall really for the entire state on Friday. And then when we get into Saturday, we're going to have another kind of slug of moisture move into western Missouri and slowly move east on Sunday and Monday before we can finally clear that last area of rainfall out later on Monday. But if we add all of these chances of rain together, we're looking at a pretty significant event later this week and into the weekend. And so here is our 7-day precipitation forecast through next Wednesday. And rainfall totals are pretty impressive here. And so where you see the reds on this map is in excess of 3 inches of rainfall that's in the forecast. And really here we're highlighting southwest Missouri as kind of maybe the bullseye for some of that heaviest precipitation, where right now the forecast is up to 5 inches that we could see there. And so for a little bit of reference, our average April precipitation in Missouri is 3.97 inches. So we really could see a few locations that see their entire month's worth of April rainfall in just a few days. So really impressive totals here. I do want to mention that along with these totals, we could see some flooding issues that arise from the rainfall. So these graphics here are excessive rainfall outlooks from the Weather Prediction Center and NOAA. And we really see Missouri highlighted in at least a marginal, which is 5% to a slight or 15% chance of flash flooding from Thursday through Sunday. And so we're really going to have to watch and see where some of those heavier rainfall amounts and storms set up. But there could be some flash flooding that we see with this rainfall, although fortunately, usually this time of spring, we'd be much more concerned with rainfall. But given our drought conditions, streams and creeks are still pretty dry and soils aren't saturated. So we are going to be able to absorb some of this rainfall and avoid some of the flooding. But I would definitely encourage you to keep an eye on the forecast and watch out for any of those flood watches or warnings that are issued. Additionally, temperatures today are really spot on for our seasonal average, but with those southerly winds, we're also going to increase our temperatures over the next few days. And here we can see by Friday, the forecast is for lower 80s to mid 80s across the entire state. And with some of that warmer air, I think we'll see our risk of severe weather increase with all of this precipitation as well. And so tomorrow, without the warm air completely in place, looks more like a rainfall event in western Missouri. But by Friday night, we'll have to start watching out for some of that severe risk. And so here I've noted from the Storm Prediction Center, they've included Missouri in a risk from Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for severe weather. So on the left here, looking at a marginal to slight risk on Friday for the entire state. Once we get into Saturday and Sunday, the graphics kind of change how they're communicating that slight risk, but still seeing it for most of the state on those 2 days. And so at this point out, 3 to 5 days in advance, all kind of modes of severe weather are still on the table, whether it's tornado, damaging winds, or hail. But stay tuned to that forecast. I think we might see some of these probabilities increase as we get closer and also get a better idea of the type of severe weather we might be forecasting through this event. Now, fortunately, by the end of the day on Monday, we'll see that rainfall move out and it'll kind of end our flooding and severe weather threat. And we should have maybe a couple days of dry weather behind this system going into later next week. But if we look at our 8 to 14 day temperature outlook, it does look like that we're going to warm up this weekend, and those warm temperatures are really going to stick around through next week and the first week of May, really. So could see a warm pattern here. And our precipitation outlook during the same time doesn't show much here, but I wanted to show this graphic, and this is an outlook released from the Climate Prediction Center yesterday that includes all of Missouri and a slight risk in western Missouri and a moderate risk for heavy precipitation from May 1st through May 3rd. And so this would be Wednesday through Friday of next week. And I share this because some of the longer term forecast models are starting to show that we might have another big rainmaker behind this weekend that comes in to impact the area later next week. So something to keep an eye on as well. And since our last Garden Hour, the Climate Prediction Center did on last Thursday release a new seasonal temperature and precipitation outlook valid for May through July here. And I want to share this, especially the temperature outlook, because you can see for nearly the entire United States and including Missouri, the forecast is for an above normal probability or of those higher than average temperatures here. And so warm temperatures in the forecast. And really, there's growing confidence in the summer forecast that we're really looking at possibly a warm summer for the entire United States, as is shown here with the forecast. Looking at precipitation only, there's not as much confidence as with the temperature. Here we see Missouri kind of on the edge of maybe a wetter than normal forecast for that period. But again, not a lot of confidence in that precipitation outlook. We'll ultimately need to monitor things as we get closer to know how that might verify into the early summer period. But overall, rain will be the story over the next week. So hopefully everyone can stay dry. Thank you.
Thanks, Zach. That's great. I'd like just everybody, if you want to participate, put in the chat. Are you going to try to get your tomatoes planted before the rain, or are you going to wait until after the rain? What do you think? Just pop it in the chat if you want to. All right, next we have foliar diseases on tomatoes, and this is coming from Justin, and this will give you an idea of maybe what to look for. Take it away, Justin.
Sorry about that. Are you guys seeing the correct screen, Gwen?
I am seeing your PowerPoint. I'm not seeing it in presentation view.
Okay. Sorry about that, everyone. Okay, how about now?
Perfect. You got it.
All right.
Take it away.
Thank you so much. All right, everyone. Well, you might think we're jumping the gun a little bit on talking about foliar diseases of tomatoes, but I think it's important to talk about this topic now because there's some things you can think about and things that you can do when you're planning out the garden to kind of set yourself up for success for the rest of the year. So I'm going to talk about some different fungi that are very commonly seen in tomatoes every year. So leaf mold or Passiflora fulva, this one's pretty common. Gray mold is another common one that can infect both fruit and foliage. Septoria leaf spot is probably one that I always get multiple calls about every year. And then early blight or Alternaria solani. So if you're ever curious and you do kind of really want to identify what disease you have, maybe it's a disease you see every year in the garden, every year on your tomatoes, we do have that MU plant diagnostic clinic. So they can take that stuff, they can culture it, put it on a slide, and identify specifically what disease issue you're dealing with. So in terms of the organisms that cause foliar diseases, so these are the big four that we generally think about. And if we think about why diseases occur, just because one of these pathogens is present doesn't mean that you're going to have a disease. So, there's millions and billions of fungi and bacteria just kind of existing in our environment, traveling on air currents, living in the soil. But in order for a pathogen to become a disease, these three factors need to align. So we need to have a susceptible host. So, a disease that affects a tomato isn't necessarily going to affect a blackberry, for instance. We need to have a conductive environment, so the right temperature and the moisture and humidity conditions for these organisms to be able to cause infection and reproduce. And that pathogen needs to be present. So when all three of those factors align, that's when we get a plant disease. So what can we do about this? Well, if we think broadly in terms of integrated pest management, we always think about host resistance. So what we're talking about here is tomato varieties and other crop varieties that have been bred to be resistant. So resistant doesn't mean that it's foolproof, that it's not going to get an infection, but it reduces the susceptibility of these plants to have a plant disease from these pathogens being present. So our hybrid varieties, a lot of times if you look in a good seed catalog, they will list these disease resistance codes. So a lot of times these have been bred and these have been studied specifically to promote resistance within these plants. Now, heirlooms, they might have resistance there, but they're just less studied. They haven't necessarily been bred specifically to be disease resistant. So although there might be resistance present, there's no university that's necessarily studying every heirloom variety. So when you look at heirloom varieties, you probably won't see these codes. But for a lot of the other varieties, you will see these in seed catalogs. So that's one foundation you can lay with host resistance. But modifying the environment is really important too, right? Because we have to have those environmental factors at the right point for these pathogens to be able to cause an infection and reproduce. So a lot of these fungal spores exist in the soil. So anything we can do to prevent the splashing up of the soil. So if you have a heavy rainfall event, you get these mud dots on your leaves. Using any kind of mulch will prevent that. So straw mulches, plastic mulches, pruning the lower leaves can also really help just to get some of that foliage up and away from the soil. Another way we can modify the environment is thinking about things like airflow. So as the canopy of a tomato plant becomes very crowded, it reduces the airflow through that canopy, and that causes higher humidity within the plant canopy. So appropriately staking or trellising tomatoes to give them the vertical room that they need to grow and spread out. We can think about spreading those plants out a little bit more, and also pruning just to reduce the density and the humidity in that canopy. Fungal diseases really thrive when overhead irrigation is used. So if that's your only option, do it in the morning that water will dry up a little bit on the leaves as the sun comes out. But we always suggest folks to use things like soaker hoses or drip irrigation. They're more efficient for one, and they also prevent the leaves from remaining as wet. So we can't control the rainfall, but we can control irrigation. And the germination of those fungal spores is often tied directly to the duration of the leaves being wet. So another pillar of IPM and disease management is sanitation and crop rotation. So we want to start with good plants. If you're buying those from a nursery, you want to inspect them for signs of disease, damage on the leaves and things like that. You can save your seed, but saved seed is one very common way that diseases can be carried over. So if you are going to do that, there are some guidelines for hot water bath treatments that you can kill those pathogens. Rotation is probably the most important one. So anything within the solanaceous family, tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, potato, they can all share diseases. So you want to physically move the place where you're planting those. You don't want to plant them year after year in the same spot. And if you have enough garden space to rotate them every 3 to 4 years, that is ideal. Removing infected foliage and fruit during the season. So as that foliage becomes infected, pruning that out, disposing of it, removing infected fruit either on the plant or that's on the ground, because those are just reservoirs of those fungal diseases that will reproduce and put off more pathogens. And removing all that crop residue. So these organisms overwinter in the soil. So if we stack rotation plus in-season sanitation plus getting up all that crop residue, we're going to reduce the fungal load that's in that soil. Another option on a smaller scale, sometimes folks just have one raised bed and it's not really physically possible to get that physical distance, that physical rotation, is growing in containers, right? Because if you can bring in that soil in those containers, that's going to be clean soil, and you're not going to be planting right into kind of a soil with a high fungal load. Not a lot of home gardeners that I deal with use fungicides, but if you're going to do so, make sure that you follow that label. It's going to have a lot of helpful information, how many ounces per gallon, for instance, how often you can spray it. Also, if there's any temperature restrictions. PPE is really important. Sometimes folks think, oh, well, if I can buy it at Home Depot, it's safe. I don't need to worry about any protection, but make sure you read that. It might tell you to wear gloves. It might tell you to wear goggles when you're mixing it. Sometimes it might recommend an adjuvant, which is just a product that will help this fungicide spray adhere to the leaf and be more effective. Pre-harvest intervals, that means if I spray this, can I harvest the fruit right away? Or does it say, wait 3 days after spraying, 7 days after spraying to harvest the fruit? We all want to be careful about protecting pollinators, and all new pesticide labels have what's called the EPA B box that will give you information on how to best apply that to reduce the probability that's going to have an impact on pollinators. I do just want to mention our MU vegetable planting calendar, which I'm sure lots of you folks have seen, but the planting dates for tomatoes starting in southern Missouri, April 20th, way down in the boot heel, and all the way up. Oh, I'm sorry, the slide's wrong. The bottom one should say northern Missouri, 5/15 through 5/30. And why I put this up is, if you jump the gun on planting tomatoes, you do risk the chance of frost damage, but also those soil temperatures just haven't warmed up, and plants need both soil temperature and air temperature to thrive and grow. And so if you get them planted too early, even if they don't get hit by the frost, they're going to be very static and not growing vigorously. And that can be a time where it's easier for a pathogen to go ahead and invade. So that's all I got.
All right, thank you, Justin. So that kind of helps us with that calendar. And I think Donna put that in the chat as well, a link to that so you can see when to plant those to kind of work around the rain and everything. So thank you. So next we are going to be talking about how to grow carrots and maybe some of the issues that come along with growing carrots. And this is Jennifer who will be talking to us about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwen. So carrots are a lot of fun to grow, especially with kids. And they come in different sizes and different colors, and they're fun to pull and then eat fresh. And I really enjoy growing carrots at home and with my youth garden program here at the Extension office. But sometimes we encounter some issues when we grow carrots. And probably the most common issue we encounter is regarding germination. Why do they take so long to germinate? Or why don't my carrots germinate when I think they should be up? Well, it takes about 3 weeks for carrot seed to germinate, and you just have to be patient. If you plant carrot seed, don't expect it to come up by a week later. So it does take time, and then do not plant the carrot seed more than 1/4 of an inch. If you plant it too deep, it may not germinate. Another common question is, why are some carrots short and stocky and others are long and slender? Well, that would be a difference in variety. So know what carrot variety you are planting. Read the package when you are in the garden center selecting what carrots to grow. Read the package closely and figure out which one you would like to grow. And for my garden program, I like to grow the rainbow of carrots. We grow all the different colors: white, yellow, different shades of orange, red, and those are really fun to grow. Sometimes we have carrots that are forked shaped. Now, why would that happen? Well, if you live in the Missouri Ozarks, it's because of rocks. And growing up as a kid, we always had carrots with forks in them because I'm from Texas County and we cannot avoid rocks in our garden. But carrots do need a loose, friable soil to develop a good shape. And forking is caused by anything that impedes root growth. And I mentioned the rocks, but it could also be nematodes or heavy compacted soil. And here in Northeast Missouri, we actually grow pretty good carrots. I don't have a lot of carrots that are forked. Our soil here is not rocky, and we usually have a nice crop of carrots. Another issue you may encounter are, why are my carrots bitter and woody? Well, carrots are a cool season vegetable. They are not a warm season crop, and they should be planted in late March or April. And then when the temperatures get hot, especially when they get above 80 degrees, the carrot color and taste does diminish. Sometimes you will see green tops on your carrots and may wonder what causes them to turn green. Well, exposure of the roots to the sun will cause the roots to get sunburned. And what you're actually seeing is chlorophyll, which is the green pigment in plants. And what you can do is hill up soil around the shoulders of the carrot roots and prevent exposure to the sun. And I often get a question regarding growing them in containers. Can carrots be grown in containers, or where should I grow my carrots? And yes, you can use large containers. The photo on the right is a large livestock lick tub for cattle. And those are carrots that I grew in it a few years ago. You can also grow carrots in raised beds or in raised rows in the garden, or a high tunnel like you see on the left. These are carrots that I grew with a market garden class last semester. And they do look like they are thick and full in those beds, but we did thin them and they just grew really well. The tops grew well, but we also had some beautiful looking carrots. As you see here, we had different colors. You also see radishes in the top there on the lower right corner. But look at those beautiful carrots. We grew white and yellow and different shades of red and orange. And like I said, carrots are just fun to grow. Kids love to pull up carrots. College students love to pull up carrots. And I also like to grow carrots. And then I freeze carrots and I will pull them out of the freezer over the winter months and use them in casseroles or soup or stews. And I just encourage people to grow carrots. Not only are they fun to grow, but they are good for you. There's a lot of nutrients in carrots that are good for your body, especially the eyes. So if you've never grown carrots, maybe you should think about growing them, but don't wait too long. Get them planted before the weather gets too hot. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Gwen.
Thank you, Jennifer. That was great. I just planted the kaleidoscope carrots with some of my elementary students that I'm working with too. So we're excited to see how they turn out. It'll be fun. Okay, we had a question come in last week about lily of the valley and maybe some pictures wanting to know if there were weeds coming in the lily of the valley bed or if this was just another growth form. So Donna is going to answer that question and explain a little bit more about lily of the valley. So Donna, if you're ready, take her away.
All right. Hope you can see this now. Okay, so the question was whether the foliage that was taller or bigger than the rest was a weed or if it was the plant, if it was actually lily of the valley. Well, before I answer that, I want to talk a little bit about lily of the valley. Most of us know what it looks like. So just to give you a little background, herbaceous perennial, which means that it dies back in the winter, comes out in the spring and green all year. So it makes a really nice ground cover. It is very hardy, but on the flip side, it is very aggressive. It's nice in the shade, and part shade, very low maintenance, and it spreads by rhizomes. But once again, it can be aggressive. Now, like I said, the concern was in this patch, some of the foliage stood up above the other foliage. So was it a weed? What was happening? That was the question. Well, we believe it's because of competition. Because the plant is so aggressive, it can start to outcompete itself. And as you can see in the picture in front of you, in this very center of the picture, there are some plants that are taller and bigger than the rest. And if you look down from above, like on this picture, you'll notice that these plants have a little more room than the other areas. The other areas are a lot more crowded and compact. And so we believe that these are a little bit bigger because they have that extra room. And because these plants can be so aggressive, they tend to compete against each other for light, moisture, nutrients, and space. And so that's what we're seeing is just an effect of the lack of competition on the big ones and the impact of the more competition on the smaller ones. So if you want all your foliage to be bigger and better, like what's these few are doing, then you will want to go in and thin your planting and make more room. If you don't mind them being smaller and filling in the area like that, well, then you might not mind the competition. And that's all I have. Back to you, Gwen.
Perfect. It's always interesting to see how plants adapt to their environment. They definitely want to take advantage of what they have.
Yes, definitely.
Our other question had to do with pawpaws, and pawpaws are kind of like Missouri's tropical fruit. And Ramon is going to answer that question for us. Ramon, I'm ready for you.
Yeah, can you see that?
Yes, we are seeing it.
Okay, well, thank you, Gwen.
Sure.
So the question was in general that they have no fruit the previous year in this pawpaw, not particularly this one. This one's pictures are from the publication that I put down there from Patrick Byers. And he had a publication with a good information about pawpaws. But in general, the question was that the pawpaw tree was setting a lot of fruit this year. And last year they did not. And previous year they have a small amount of fruit. So we're going to talk about what's the situation in setting more fruits. How can we thin it? Yes, we can thin it. But there are other factors that you have to keep in consideration, whether to thin, how much to thin, and how much a tree can produce. We're going to talk a little bit about that. So let's see there. So thinning pawpaws is you have to think in what's the fruit load that you expect from the tree. And that depends on how much fruit can the tree sustain. And in that sense, it depends on the tree size. Larger trees were going to sustain more fruits than smaller trees. As the trees grows, you should expect a higher load of fruit. But also the health of the trees would influence how many fruits does the tree or the tree can sustain and grow in a good size. You expect to have a good size. Other things that you have to think on that is pruning. When you don't prune the tree, it tends to grow a lot of wood, and the fruits are concentrated in the edges outside the tree. And that's why fruit trees usually are pruned, and from the beginning, from the first year, we form the tree in a way that the light can penetrate the canopy. If you don't prune the tree, the light does not penetrate the canopy, and that's when you see the leaf mostly outside. The growth becomes, when the tree is already big or large, the growth becomes very small, the yearly growth, and that means it's going to have less potential fruit. And in the most important part, that if you have too many branches, you're expecting a very long branch to produce a few fruits at the end of the branch. That's something that we have to avoid. That's why we prune the trees, to allow more sunlight to penetrate the canopy. So instead of having many branches, you have fewer branches with more fruit per branch. Yeah, that's the idea of pruning and formation of the tree. You want to focus on producing fruit, not wood. The other part is pollination. There are a lot of trees like pawpaw that most of the varieties need another variety to pollinate that tree. There are a few that can self-pollination, but most of them do better, produce more fruits when they have another variety close by for cross-pollination. And the other thing that influences the load is environmental conditions. If you have an irrigation system, so it has a good soil moisture, good sunlight, and full sunlight. If you want more fruit, you want to have full sunlight. Although pawpaw was originated in understories, an understory tree, but to produce fruit, you want full sun. So that's another factor that you can consider if you're going to have a large load or a poor load, fruit load in the tree. And there are other factors, of course, temperature and talking about soil moisture, you have to have the adequate soil moisture. Excessive of soil moisture, it also would influence and reduce detrimentally the load of fruits in the tree. And of course, drought will affect it too. That's why irrigation is so important to maintain a healthy, good growth tree. So as I mentioned before, as the tree increases in size, a larger fruit load you can expect until the full size tree. Now the full size tree a lot of time depend on how you prune it. I mean, it can get to 25 feet high, but if you prune it to a size that you can manage it, so you don't need to use a ladder to harvest the fruit, is also possible. And so management does have a lot to do with the size of the tree. Now, one thing that you have to understand to see how much fruit are you going to get and if you're going to need thinning is, where does the fruit come? The fruit does not come out, or the flowers do not come out in any part of the tree. It only comes in the axis of the previous year leaves. That means wood that or growth that have, twigs that have grown last year. If you let the branch to grow too large, too long, and it doesn't have side twigs or branches, you're only gonna produce at the end of that branch. And as I mentioned before, the tree is gonna use a lot of reserves in growing wood and not fruit. That's why it's important, the pruning and the formation of the tree. So focus on the last year growth. That's where the flowers and the fruits are gonna be. Too strong growth, it may not produce flowers. So it has to be a moderated growth, let's say 1.5 to 2 feet. Larger than that, it may induce, it may not stay, the buds may not be reproductive. It's not going to be flower buds. So a twig of a foot to 2 feet is going to be a good size twig or growth from last year. And those are the ones that are going to produce the best fruit. And this is similar to peaches, and since the question indicated peaches. It's usually the last year growth that is going to produce fruit and produce fruit and be harvesting. And the load will depend on that. So now the fruit set may be increased following poor or no fruit bearing year, like the person that submitted the questions indicated that the previous year they have no fruits. And that may have promoted, because the tree did not spend resources in fruit, everything that the tree did practically was to grow new twigs and extend the growth of the tree. And that's why it may have a lot more growth and flowers this year. And in those situations is when we call the tree has become biennial. That means they produce fruit 1 year, the load is so large that it does not have reserves to produce fruit the year after. And when it does not produce fruit, it will grow better and it will have more twigs and flowers to have a large load of fruit the year after. So that's why it becomes biennial. Every other year you will have fruit. Normally pruning and thinning would help to have every year fruit load. You manage the tree so every year you're gonna have a fruit load that is not large enough to exhaust the trees. So you're allowed to some new growth that is going to be good for next year, but you're going to have also a good crop this year. So pruning and thinning is something that you have to keep in consideration in managing fruit trees. And this is for all fruit trees. You want to look into that. In the case of pawpaw also, and many other fruit, there is a natural fruit drop or fall off after flowering. It happens with apples, with peaches, with every fruit. So that's why something that you have to keep in mind, that usually right after flowering, there's going to be some fruits falling off, and sometimes a lot of them. Yeah? And this depends on the variety, on the load of the tree. If it's too many, the tree cannot sustain all those fruits, and they're going to start to fall off. So the load, the nutrient, is a nutrient competition sufficient. If there is sufficient foliage to sustain the load, they're going to stay there. But if it's poor foliage, a lot of fruits are going to fall. Another part that induces fruit fall is environmental conditions, soil moisture. Drought, for example, or excess of water. Lack of sunlight and temperature may influence fruit drop. Pollination also influences fruit drop. If the pollination is not good, the fruit is going to have only 1 or 2 seeds. Those are weak fruits. So a fruit that has more than 2 seeds, the more seeds is stronger fruit, and it's going to stay longer in the fruit. And those with little seed or few seeds are going to drop. And also depend on insect pests and the overall health of the tree. In general, as I said before, can the tree sustain that load? But if you have too many fruits, each cluster as you see in that picture can set in there, you see 4 fruit, but it can become up to 9 fruit per cluster. And that might be too many per cluster, particularly if the foliage cannot sustain that many. So thinning is recommended to 1 to 2 fruits per cluster to increase the fruit size and reduce further fruit drop, and also to reduce the biennial production. One thing that you have to keep in mind, wait until the fruit is 1 inch long and the risk of frost have passed. So that in that sense, in that way, you're gonna make sure that you still have fruits before for your harvest, and the tree is gonna keep producing year after year. And that's all I have. If you have any questions.
Thank you, Ramon. I don't know about you. I'm hearing that song in my head, picking up the pawpaws, putting them in my pocket. Now you know why I don't sing behind Taylor Swift, right? But anyway, thank you for that information.
One curiosity is that pawpaw, most of the fruit trees relative to pawpaw are tropical and subtropical fruit. Pawpaw is the only tree of that group, of only species of that group of tree that is a temperate tree here in the United States. Most of them are from Central America, South America, tropical areas.
Yeah, and that makes it really quite interesting. And I love the flowers on that tree. I think it's just really attractive to have. Pretty cool. Okay, thank you. Our next presentation will be again from Donna. We have seen some questions come in about cut flowers, and Donna has quite a bit of experience, as do some of our other horticulture specialists around the state. And she's just going to talk about maybe how to start a small cutting garden. Thank you, Donna.
Thank you, Gwen. So yes, cut flowers is something that we're hearing a lot from people asking, how do you do it? What plants do you pick? You know, so on and so forth. And so we are trying to put together more programming about how to do a small cut flower garden that home gardeners can do. So first off, I want to talk about how do you select which cut flowers you want to grow. Well, I always try to go off of what I like. You know, I'm not going to grow something I'm never going to use and I'm never going to like, and I don't think it's pretty. I'm always going to try to pick something that is my favorite color or shape, or it's got some attractive feature. And so I always try to encourage people, flip through some of the flower magazines and start taking a look at what would you like to have in your fresh flower bouquets sitting in your house. The other thing that you want to look at when you're flipping through these catalogs is there's usually a scissor symbol or on the packet or the catalog that will indicate that it is a cut flower variety. What sets it apart from a regular flower variety is the length of the stem. So I love these cut flower marigolds that I grow. They're big and yellow or bigger orange. The big difference between this marigold and normal marigolds is I can get a 12-inch stem or longer out of the variety I grow. So it's been specifically grown for a longer stem. Zinnias are the same way. Asters are the same way. You want to go with something with a long stem. Now, if you don't mind small little bouquets, then go with normal varieties, because then you might get a 4-inch or a 6-inch stem. Just depends on how the flower is growing. Think about diversity when you're picking flowers for the cut flower garden. You want big flowers, small flowers. You want something real showy and colorful, and you want some of the more bland things just for filler also. You want to think about big flowers, little flowers, tall, short, just you want that diversity in it. And there are some things that you're going to start from seeds, and then there's other things that you're going to start from transplant. And a lot of these catalogs will tell you which ones to do which way. For example, bachelor buttons is one of our favorites. It's one I don't do transplant. It just doesn't transplant well. So I won't start it indoors. I wait it until the soil is warm enough outdoors, and I sow it outdoors. Whereas something like snapdragons, I can get a jump start indoors, and I know it's going to take about 6 to 8 weeks to have a nice transplant that I can go into the garden with it. Yes, it does take trial and error to figure it all out, but it can be learned and learned quickly. Don't forget that if it gets, with the taller, longer, lankier plants, you're also going to have to net or cage them. And so just be prepared for that. Tomato cages can come in pretty handy just for also caging the flowers to keep them upright. Okay, there we go. Just to share some of my favorite flowers that I can use easily for cut flowers. My first one is zinnias. There are all sorts of colors of zinnias, sizes of zinnias, single blooms, double blooms, cactus blooming. They're just amazing. You can get packets that are pure colors. You can get packets that are mixed colors. And so I really think that you can do a lot just with zinnias alone for a bouquet of flowers. Then there's cosmos. Once again, used to we could only get the orange, the old classic orange and yellow cosmos or a plain pink. Now we have double blooms and single blooms, and we have pink and white decoratives. I mean, there's just so many cosmos. The big thing about cosmos is not getting it too thick. If you get the seedlings too thick, then they tend to get too long and lanky and fall over. You want a shorter, stouter plant. Watch the spacing on it. Then we have all sorts of different sunflowers. And sunflowers are always good to have for bouquets. Pay attention to the number of days to harvest, because there are short days. So number of days till you get a bloom. And there's varieties that have very long days until you're going to get a bloom. So just pay attention. You can get big flowers, small flowers. You can get fall colored flowers, really bright yellow, sunny disposition type flowers. And I love the lower left picture, which is this teddy bear variety of sunflower. And it's one that my girls absolutely loved as they were getting older in the garden, because they were just so fun and furry. Then we have marigolds. Once again, you can have a dwarf marigold. You can have tall stemmed marigolds. Just depends on what you want. And I love it because all the color combinations are typically very unique in their color patterns. And so you can get a lot of diversity just in marigolds in a bouquet, and they can look just so amazing. Don't forget that there are perennials that you can use. These are two of our classic perennials, Echinacea and Rudbeckia. These are our mainstays when we talk about cut flowers. Once again, we just don't have the plain purple coneflower anymore. We now have whites and salmons and pinks and ones with furry centers and doubles. So, and same way with the Rudbeckia. So we are in a great time in horticulture because we have such diversity, even in just in Rudbeckia, or what we call black-eyed Susans, or the Echinacea, or the zinnias, or the cosmos. We have lots to pick from. And I know I get excited about this, and I hope all of you do too, because there's so many things that can be grown for a cut flower. This is just, I threw a bunch of pictures on this slide just to show you that it goes a lot further than just marigolds and zinnias. You can use a lot more plants in that annual cut flower garden. And same way with the perennials. You can use a lot of the perennials as a mainstay. The downside to perennials is you're only going to get about 6 weeks worth of bloom in the summer, whereas annuals, you can cut them back and fertilize them pretty good and keep them going. Now, one thing I always tell people, if you plant zinnias early in the season, you may want to replant them mid-season so that you can have a new bunch of flowers that will be refreshed, especially by fair time. You might want to put the flowers into the fair for getting some premium money. But everybody's always looking for that beautiful bouquet, and I just am always amazed what people can do. This is a guide that I put together several years back during COVID, and I encourage all of you to go take a look at it. It's for youth. It's a youth gardening activity. However, all of us we're young at heart, so we can use this information too. So go out there, print it off, and you can start your own cut flower garden just by some of these simple tips. And if any of you have any questions, you can always reach out to me by phone or email, and I'd be glad to help you. So back to you, Gwen.
Thank you, Donna. I think that's great information about how to get that cut flower garden going. Well, we are about, yes.
We have a question.
Sure.
Where can I buy a pawpaw tree? And Ramon, since you gave that presentation, can you tell us where somebody might find a pawpaw tree? Okay, he may have stepped away. I'm not sure, other than to look at your native plant nurseries. I think I might have seen some for sale at Baker Creek Heirloom Seed Company there in Mansfield. They're in front of their store a few years back, and I haven't been for a few years. But if you may, I mean, if you're from the, I don't know where you're from, but from that, if you're in that area, you might stop there. But check out your native plant nurseries.
If you're
And
near Rolla, Missouri, we'll have pawpaw trees in our plant sale on the Saturday before Mother's Day.
great, okay. And Donna says Forest Keeling Nursery and Missouri Wildflower Nursery. Thank you, Donna.
And perhaps the Department of Conservation, they do have native trees too, so it might be able to find some there.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I think that, and there are many different varieties now that you can get larger fruit on the pawpaws. So you can kind of, like Donna was saying with the cut flowers, there are just lots of different varieties that we can go with. So good question. Thank you for submitting that. All right, we are about to wind down. I want to just give you a brief overview of some of the events that are coming up. So let me go ahead and do that real quick. So our upcoming events. Okay, if you are in Northwest Missouri, we have a couple of hydroponic workshops that are coming up May 16th and May 30th. The May 16th one is in Carrollton, Missouri, and the one on May 30th is in Albany, Missouri. So we would like for you to check that out. That would be Kathy Meacham and myself that are working with those. I also have a Starting the Garden part two series that talks just a little bit about insects, diseases, and weeds in your garden. If you're interested, that will be up here in Maryville, Missouri. And we have a similar webinar series coming from Donna down in the southeast part of the state. And you can go to myextension.edu, and that will, I'll show you that website here in just a little bit where you can register for that webinar series, just helping you with managing the garden. We have another hydroponics in the northeast part of Missouri. This will be with Jennifer near Kirksville. And then if you're in the central part of the state, we have in Waynesville, Missouri. I'm going to start over here on the right side of the screen. That is tomorrow on composting. So you might want to go check that out and get to that if you're in that part of the state. And then also in Jefferson City and in Tuscumbia, Missouri, we'll be talking about growing tomatoes. So you can kind of put that information that you learned from Justin to use as well. It kind of goes along with those workshops. I also want to mention that in September, we have the Missouri Master Gardeners Association Conference. This will be September 27th, 28th, and 29th at Missouri Western State University here in St. Joseph, Missouri. This is put on by our Northwest Missouri Master Gardeners group. And the theme is gardening with purpose, with a purpose. So just a lot of learning. And as was mentioned just a minute ago, there are lots and lots of Master Gardener plant sales going on in the next few weeks. So look around for them, help support the Master Gardeners. I do want to give just a quick shout out to the Master Gardeners because you do so much volunteer service. So thank you for all that you do and everything that you do to help make our communities a little bit better. All right, and then to find events, again, you just go to extension.missouri.edu/events, and then you can just type in gardening and all kinds of programs will come up that are either presented by extension specialists or by Master Gardeners. So we welcome you to take a look at all of that. And with that, folks, let me get another one up here. I just want to remind you where you can find us at youtube.com with the search of MUIPM. You can watch us live. If you have a question, you can fill out this form, just like we had the 2 questions today, and we will try to answer that on the air. Our next meeting will be May 1st, noon to 1 o'clock. And then if you're wanting to save the chat, you'll need to, they've kind of changed this. You'll want to go to the three little dots that are at the top of the, the screen, and then it will give you the option to save that chat. Just a reminder of where your horticulture specialists are. And with that, folks, that is a wrap. Thank you so much for joining us today. We know your time is precious, so we are very grateful to you for spending it with us here today, and just feel free to reach out to us with any questions that you might have. Thank you.